Oh yeah, I think I didn't discuss this before on a video, but I talked to a priest about this recently, where it was the way that God reached me and moved me and touched me in my life was, there's three ways that the church talks about how God is accessible to us, through divine revelation, through the natural, created world and the order and structure within it, and then also, through our awareness and consciousness of His presence within us, in our souls, and our ability to reflect upon, the fact that we're conscious and we're thinking beings, and there's some kind of interior life that's going on within us, which to varying degrees we may be aware more or less of. And so I was aware that there was something going on, but I couldn't exactly put my finger on it, and I didn't understand it at the time. But what I do remember specifically and clearly coming to was conclusions about certain things, and at the time I couldn't have understood them and articulated it as truth, but that's what it was. And in fact, one of the things that I came to the conclusion about, which I'm sure now was through the promptings of grace and the Holy Spirit that was operating in my soul, and perhaps the prayers of this priest and religious sister, and the angels and saints in heaven, and Mother Mary's guiding hand, and God's intervention in my life. But so I came to the conclusion that lying and being dishonest was difficult path in life, and it was easier to not lie and just to tell the truth and be truthful. And as I came to that realization and started to try to put that truth into practice, I began to realize that there were other benefits to it, in addition to it being easier. That it also made me feel better about myself in terms of not being a liar anymore. And at the time, again, I couldn't articulate this in terms of any serious or meaningful reflection upon God and His activity in my life. However, I was becoming more conscious of His presence and seeking out conversations with people about this. And one of the things that I did, I remember meeting with that priest at the Newman Center a couple times and talking to him about how the life of Malcolm X really kind of moved me and touched me, and that one of the lines in there from his book, the autobiography of Malcolm X, was that if you take one step towards Allah, Allah will take 2 steps towards you. And I remember sharing that with him, and he kind of barked at me and said, well, it's God provides the initiative, and it's God's grace that initiates the step that you take towards Him in the first place. And I was like, okay, but I was kind of like, well, but I mean, later thinking back, I'm like, it's not a theology test or anything like that. Like, He also allows us to be led along, coming to know Him in a way that is unique to our particular personality. Not that God would ever deny any truth, but He allows us to come to these conclusions, more deliberately, I guess, than other people at times are willing to allow us to come to the conclusions by ourselves, and which makes sense because they're not God, right? So anyway, so this discussion with him was one of many, and there was this Irish girl who moved to the United States and was working at the Chart House, which had reopened, and I started waiting tables there again, like in February of 1994. And so I would find time to talk to her about God, and we'd have these discussions. And I remember this one guy who he was like a real go-getter. He worked as a valet at the Long Wharf Marriott and was like one of the up and coming, new head waiters at the Chart House, and really ambitious. And he walked in on us a couple times talking about God and made the comment, he's like, "Man, you sure do talk about God a lot." And then I had some other experiences, like I was working on Easter Sunday and still not going back to Mass, but I waited tables on this Jewish family, and they were just really hostile about Jesus, and I don't even remember how the topic came up other than it was Easter, and I think they made some comment that all these people were in here celebrating the resurrection of a man who never existed, and he was a myth, and I found myself at the table defending Jesus, even though I had no clue, really about what the resurrection was all about or anything. But it was one of those moments where it was like the Holy Spirit just gave you words, you didn't have to be prepared, and it bore out the truth that the Holy Spirit is the one who can deliver knowledge to you. I mean, that's one of the gifts that we receive in our confirmation, and so we should put our trust and our faith in that. And so life continued on, but the other thing that I came to the conclusion about was about chastity. But again, I couldn't have articulated it in that way. But what happened was, I was continuing to see this girl Monica that I had mentioned before, and over the summer we had talked about getting married, and we had made plans to kind of see how things went, and then maybe get engaged later. And so one of the things that happened was her family had planned a trip to India. Her dad was from India, and so they went there, and I was not invited to go, which at the time I kind of took offense about that. But in truth, once they were gone and I went to Illinois with a high school friend and stayed with his mom and spent the Christmas with his family, and they were all Mennonite, and very religious, and although he was living a pretty secular life as well. But man, I feel really bad about so anyway, I came to the realization, and again it was just through natural God revealing these things to me into my mind without really knowing where they were coming from. But I realized that during the time that we were apart, I was remaining chaste and free and celibate, which I hadn't been doing before. And it really had started to make a difference in my ability to think more clearly and to see what was going on in my life more clearly, and to come to know God more clearly. And so when she came back from India, I also became concerned because she was using birth control pills, and somehow I knew that was wrong, even though I had no clue about anything about church teaching at that point. And so I asked her if she would consider, stopping using birth control pills, and rather than understanding it from the perspective that I was trying to deliver it from, which was concern for her, that first of all, it seemed like she was addicted to it, or there was something wrong with the use of them. She looked at it as a rejection of her, like I wanted to stop having sexual intercourse with her, which had been a part of our relationship the entire time we were together. And so I think in her mind it was me wanting to break up with her, which was not my intention at all. But the way that she reacted to it did lead me to start thinking that maybe I needed to break up, and separate myself from this relationship, because we were heading in different directions for sure. And so that's what happened. We broke up. I had a friend of mine come over and move my stuff out of there, and like I said, I was living with my dad at the time, so it was easier because I had an actual place of my own that I could go back to, and so truth and purity of heart were the two first steps. And then somewhere along the line, I also, in that book I think it came across this concept of humility. And then also the thing in it that really, I can't remember it now, but it was, you know, if you sow a thought, you will reap an action. If you sow an action, you will reap a habit. If you sow a habit, you will reap a destiny. And